I never expected to find my ex-husband selling TEA on that train. What followed was life-changing. I will never forget the day everything fell apart. I found myself on that train, breathing in the musty air mixed with the smell of burnt coffee and cheap cologne. I thought I had escaped the ghosts of my past when I moved to this city. I was wrong. Heart racing, I turned the corner of the dimly lit compartment, and there he was. Jake. My Jake. The man I thought I'd never see again. Standing there, smiling like nothing had changed. His eyes met mine and time seemed to stop. I felt my breath hitch, a lump forming in my throat. Our history surged through me like a jolt of electricity. Memories flooded back, all those late nights and whispered secrets. But then, the sight of him holding a steaming cup of tea felt surreal. It wasn't just tea, it was a colorful array of exotic blends, each one displayed like it held some dark secret. He handed a cup to a passenger, their laughter echoing through the carriage, but it crashed against my heart. Why was he here? On this train? Selling tea, of all things? I struggled to push back the emotions. My trembling hands clutched the strap of my bag. I wanted to turn back, to run. But a force I couldn't explain held me in place. I was spinning in this whirlwind of confusion, anger, and an undeniable flicker of hope. Our divorce was raw, painful. The betrayal still stung like a fresh wound. Yet, here he was. He looked different. Healthier. Happier. I wished I could hate him. Instead, I was captivated by this peculiar scene, a whirlwind of uncertainty swirling around us. Curious faces gleamed with intrigue, murmurs rippled through the crowd as they took in the sight of us. Is that? I heard a woman whisper, her eyes darting between us. The tension prickled my skin. I wanted to confront him, to unleash the fury I had bottled up for years. What has he been hiding? Why this? Why now? But my feet remained rooted to the floor, as if the universe was conspiring to keep me in this moment. And just like that, amidst the chaos of life on that train, I felt something shift. A question hung in the air, thick and suffocating: was this destiny, or merely a twist of fate? Before I could gather my thoughts, he caught my eye again, and that familiar flicker of mischief stirred within him. It was a signal. A challenge. All I could do was stand there, heart racing and breathless, a million questions boiling inside me. Hey, before we continue with this amazing story, I need to give you an important heads up. Many subscribers have reported that YouTube unsubscribed them without warning. Take a quick second to check the red button below to make sure you're still subscribed to the channel. I'd hate for you to miss any of the exclusive content coming soon. And while you're there, smash that like button, it really helps me out with the algorithm. Oh, and tell me in the comments, which city are you watching from? I love getting to know every amazing person who's part of this community. Your participation makes all the difference. Let's connect. I stood there, locked in a frantic gaze with Jake, the confusion nudging at my heart while my mind raced. The cacophony of the train faded into a dull hum, and the warmth of bodies crammed together felt like a distant memory. A single moment stretched out, suspended between the chaos inherited from our past and the uncertainty of the path ahead. Emma? His voice was the same, yet different, softened with an edge of vulnerability that I couldn't ignore. The years and the heartbreak hung like a veil between us, but I could sense that spark of mischief and reckless joy in his tone. What are you doing here? Was the only thing I could manage to say, my voice barely breaking through the haze of emotions. I braced myself for a lie, a half-baked excuse that would unravel everything I thought I knew about him, but instead of answering, Jake stepped closer, his smile faltering. I needed to do something different. Something real. The sincerity in his eyes startled me. It's been a while, hasn't it? His casual acknowledgement of the years felt like a slap, each word laced with unspoken emotions. Memories surged forth, the last day we saw each other, the silence that encapsulated the divorce, the void that had filled my life since he walked away. The train jolted as it entered a tunnel, plunging us into darkness, abruptly separating us from the stares of the curious passengers. "Is it really you?" I murmured, almost to myself. "Yeah." He laughed softly, but there was something weighted beneath the mirth. A hint of a story I didn't know, a reason why he traded a life I used to know for this strange niche of tea selling. Suddenly, the vibrancy of the blends, the colorful packages, seemed to come alive, each whispering a fragment of his journey. I felt compelled to reach out, to ask, to scream, to demand answers, but the words lay like stones in my throat. So instead, I took a tentative step forward, daring to bridge the chasm that stretched between us. "What happened after the divorce?" He cut me off gently, the spark in his eyes dimming momentarily before reigniting with warmth. "Honestly, it was hard to really give up on us. It felt like I was in a fog for a long time. I had to find myself again. You know?" I nodded, barely absorbing his words. I wanted to scoff, to tell him that finding himself didn't erase the pain he caused, that it didn't matter. But something in his gaze drew me in, forcing me to lower my defenses, if only for a moment. As the darkness in the tunnel faded, illuminating us once again, I caught sight of a small girl nearby, clutching a patchwork teddy bear. She stepped closer, eyes wide with wonder at the unusual sight of two grown adults caught in a tangle of emotions. She held out her toy, and I felt a flicker of hope, a reminder that innocence and kindness still existed in the world. "Can you make my bear tea?" she asked, her voice nonchalant amid the tangled web of adult feelings. Jake knelt down, his face softening. "Of course. What flavors do you like?" I watched as he dedicated himself to creating a miniature cup for the teddy bear, his fingers deftly pouring a bit of tea into a small plastic cup he carried. The little girl's delighted squeals broke the tension between us, pulling me into an unexpected warmth that replaced the icy past. Maybe, just maybe, he wasn't the man I last saw, a shell of a person, but someone truly willing to change, to evolve. But just when that glimmer of understanding began to break through the walls I'd built, a rhythmic chime pierced the air, announcing an upcoming stop. My stomach dropped. The moment was fleeting, a delicate bloom ready to wilt under the pressures of reality. "Listen," I said, my heart pounding. I needed to go deeper, to find a reason behind his sudden appearance. "Can we talk more? Two don't know what I'm feeling right now, booty want that too," he replied quickly, biting his lip. "But I can't stay, Emma. I have to finish my route." "Just please, don't go yet." Before I could respond, the train screeched to a halt. The doors hissed open, and a deep chill washed through the compartment. I was about to step outside, wanting to escape the whirlwind he brought with him. But as I turned, the little girl was gone, and behind her was a figure I hadn't expected to see: me sister, Maggie. Her eyes darted between me and Jake, confusion etched across her face. "Emma?" she called, urgency in her tone that my heart sank. I was suddenly caught in a web of consequences yet to be addressed, each thread vibrating with unanswered questions. Just then, I glanced back at Jake, the weight of our submerged history coursing through the air. Would the echoes of the train journey consume us, or would they bring light to the shadows of our past? Unbeknownst to me, that moment of recognition would set off a chain reaction darker than either of us anticipated. My sister's presence felt foreboding, a warning sign that my past was far from finished with me. I could feel the air thicken, as if the train itself held its breath, waiting to see how the pieces would fall. Maggie's eyes flickered between Jake and me, anxiety pooling in her features like a storm gathering on the horizon. "Emma, what's going on?" she asked, her voice laced with an urgency I couldn't ignore. It was a question that pierced through the fragile bubble that had momentarily enveloped Jake and me, fragile and beautiful yet teetering on the edge of collapse. I just ran into Jake," I managed, my heart racing as I watched disbelief wash across her face. I could already sense her instincts kicking in. She would dissect this situation with precision if I gave her the chance. "Jake?" she repeated, her voice barely a whisper, as if saying his name could summon all the pain wrapped up in our past. I saw the recognition dawn in her eyes. Maggie had always been protective. She had grown to hate Jake for the way he'd shattered my heart, for the void he left behind. Can we talk?" Jake interjected, stepping closer to me, the old spark igniting anew between us. But the warmth fading from Maggie's expression convinced me that this was not the time for that. "Maggie, wait," I said, my voice wavering with the weight of the moment. "This is complicated." "Complicated?" she echoed, her brows furrowing. "Emma, you can't possibly think it's okay to just stand here and pretend things haven't changed." "They have changed, Maggie." I shot back, feeling a swell of emotions surge within me. I didn't want to defend Jake, and yet, there was a spark of resolve within me that demanded to be heard. "He's trying to explain. Please." The train jolted again as it began to pull away, a reminder that time was fleeting, that all of us, Jake, Maggie, and he, had moments to seize, even amid the chaos of life. Maggie's expression softened slightly, curiosity flickering in her eyes, yet her body remained tense. "What does he want to explain?" Afraid to go through the messy details of how he ruined everything? I felt a hot sting behind my eyes at her words, a flash of all the love and laughter we had shared before the cracks turned into canyons. "That wasn't his only choice, Maggie. He's here now trying to sell tea on a train," she muttered under her breath, unimpressed. But something had shifted. The protective instincts receded momentarily, giving way to an open-mindedness that I never expected from her. "I want you to understand," Jake said, his voice steady, yet laced with vulnerability. "I'm not who I was, and I promise I'm here with open arms, but I need you to let this happen." "Let it happen?" Maggie scoffed, crossing her arms tightly against her chest. "And what? You're just going to explain away years of heartbreak? You think we can let it happen after everything?" The anger in her voice prickled, but Jake didn't flinch. Instead, he met her gaze with unyielding conviction. "No, I can't change the past, but I can try to make a future different, a future where both of you can forgive, maybe even understand." The weight of his words hung in the air, enveloping us with a mix of hope and fear. My heart clenched as I saw a fleeting flicker in Maggie's expression, a question poised at the edge of her mind. I could almost hear the gears turning, contemplating what forgiveness might look like. But before she could respond, a sudden, sharp scream erupted from the other side of the train, slicing through the fragile peace we had just begun to forge. We turned in unison, our hearts sinking as chaos unfolded. Silhouettes of passengers scrambling as an unknown figure stood shouting in the aisle, flanked by what looked like security guards, "Get the hell away from my mom." The figure yelled, eyes wild with desperation, "Maggie." I whispered, my gut twisting. The chaos swirled around us, drowning our small understanding in an ocean of fear and confusion. We instinctively stepped closer together, our past fears nullified momentarily by a more immediate threat. "Stay close," Maggie instructed, her protective instincts flipping back into high gear, glancing nervously at Jake. "We need to find out what's happening." But as the shouting intensified, I felt a chilling realization pierce through the pandemonium. Among the shouting, a familiar name echoed in the air: "Me father's." The momentum was shifting again, jerking us away from the path Jake had introduced into my life and back toward the shadows of my childhood. "No, not him," I murmured, dread pooling in my stomach as my heart thudded painfully between past and present. And as I met Jake's concerned eyes, I realized this was merely the beginning. A tornado of confusion beginning to unfurl, ripping apart the fragile threads of my new reality with every chaotic scream that filled the train. We were not just stalled in a train compartment anymore. We had been pulled into a storm that might change everything once again, especially with the secrets my father had buried waiting to resurface with deadly force. The chaos erupted around us, the train compartment trembling under the weight of panic. My heart raced alongside the frenzied shouts, each voice a desperate plea ricocheting off the walls. "Emma, stay close." Maggie's words barely registered as my focus shifted to the figure hunched in the aisle, fury and desperation etched across his face. "Where's my mom?" he shouted, launching forward, arms flailing as if he could push back the guards closing in. The world spun wildly, a carousel of memories. I caught glimpses of family gatherings, laughter punctuating long summer afternoons, a lifetime before everything altered. It was impossible not to remember how my father used to loom over us then, full of power and comfort, in stark contrast to the fear spreading through me at this moment. Wait. I gasped, my voice lost in the turmoil. What's happening? Who is he? Jake immediately turned toward me, his presence grounding. We need to find out. Stick together. There was a protection in his gaze that reoriented my spiraling thoughts. Despite everything, I felt a flicker of resolve rise within me, urging me to step into the chaos rather than retreat. Maggie rushed forward, and I followed suit, squeezing past bewildered faces, trying to navigate the shuffling bodies. Each echo of my father's name struck a discordant note within me, a reminder of the turbulent history I had fought to escape. The years spent rebuilding my life felt as fragile as glass, shattering beneath the weight of old ghosts. As we reached the epicenter of the disturbance, I caught sight of a slender woman, age etched on her features, trapped between the brawny security personnel who loomed like giants shielding her from her son. My heart sank. It was Mrs. Robinson, the one constant fixture in my childhood. Even amidst the upheaval, I felt the warmth of an old memory, her comforting smile like a beacon. I heard her voice then, soft and soothing, as she read to me all those evenings in her cozy living room. Let her go. Her son screamed, face contorted with fear. You don't understand. They'll take her away. I didn't mean to. The words tumbled out in a rush of anguish, threading through my heart like a sharp needle. I looked towards Jake, seeing my confusion mirrored in his expression. What does he mean? I whispered, but he shook his head, lost in the unfolding drama. Stop. Everyone just stop. My voice pierced through, surprising even me as I stepped forward. Please. What's going on? My own courage surprised me, but the desperation driving my actions felt necessary. What's it to you? The son shot back, anger blazing in his eyes as he met mine. You don't even know what's happening. Just stay out of it. I know you, I replied, frustration bubbling in my chest. I used to know your family. What's happening? At that moment, an eerie silence descended, the bustling crowd freezing as if time itself had stalled. My heart strummed an irregular beat, the world narrowing as the young man's gaze softened, reality crashing back. My mom, she's been sick. They're trying to take her to the hospital. She's scared. My dad, his voice broke, raw and agonized. The fragments fell into place. My father's shadow loomed large, his relations casting a dark pall over more than just my own past. He's involved, isn't he? I breathed, mustering every ounce of strength I had. Tell me the truth. Jake stepped toward the family, sensing the emotional turmoil gripping me. We can help, he promised, though uncertainty tinged his voice, his posture protective yet questioning. Just let her speak to her son. The guards hesitated, glancing at each other, their authority challenged in the wake of raw emotion. For a moment, I tasted hope piercing through the fear, tethering us all in a shared crisis. Mrs. Robinson's eyes locked onto mine, a glimmer of recognition passing between us in those fleeting instants of silence. Emma? She whispered, her voice shaking like leaves in a storm. I felt a surge of empathy, the kind that rekindles bonds buried under years of bitterness. Please help me. Before I could respond, a loud crash resonated from the back of the train, sending a wave of panic surging through the passengers. The security guards shifted, pivoting to confront this new threat. An even larger commotion erupted, shouts thinning the air as chaos swept back in. Emma. Maggie pulled me back instinctively, our lives once again colliding with blurring edges and realities. I couldn't help but feel as if I were caught in a web, strands of fear and love interwoven tighter with every passing second. The swirling emotions twisted inside me, the tragedies of our intertwined past collided with a present full of uncertainty. Then, from the depths of the commotion, a familiar figure emerged, a man hardly recognizable, yet unmistakably shaped by lineage and circumstance. It was my father, his presence commanding, dark eyes surveying the chaos with eerie calm. In that instant, the air crackled with visceral tension, a new terrain of emotional crisis unfolding. Dread pooled in my stomach as he locked eyes with mine, a silent promise of uncertainty passing between us. Fear washed over me. I was drawn back into a tempest I thought I had escaped, the reunion with my past seemingly inevitable, and as shadows curled around the edges of hope, everything we had just begun to stitch together threatened to unravel once more, leaving us dangling precariously at the edge of newfound grief and realization. The confrontation was only beginning, and it felt as if we were teetering on the brink of something truly life-changing. As my father's gaze held mine, the world around us faded into a stillness laden with suffocating dread. I could feel my heart pounding in my chest, loud like a war drum, every beat a painful reminder of the years lost to his absence. The chaos around me seemed to dissolve into a blur, emotions bubbling up, threatening to spill over. "Emma," he called, voice low and steady, cutting through the noise, yet carrying with it a weight that threatened to crush me. It's been a long time that I wanted to scream. I wanted to shout every accusation I had rehearsed in my mind over the years since his departure, each reason for my resentment knitting together in a fierce tapestry of pain. But the sight of him, standing tall and unbowed amidst the turmoil, complicated my outrage. Hadn't I spent years yearning for some semblance of closure, for some form of understanding? Yet here he was, returning like a specter summoned from my past, and the reality of it felt surreal. "Why are you here?" I managed to ask, my voice barely rising above a whisper. "What do you want?" His face remained inscrutable, shadows dancing across his features, but for a moment, I caught a flicker of something, perhaps remorse. "I didn't mean for any of this to happen," he said, gesturing toward the confusion surrounding us. "But I can help. I can fix this." The accusation in my veins flared at his words, and I couldn't suppress a bitter laugh, the sound sharp and laden with tragedy. "You have a funny way of showing care, Dad. Your return seems more calculated than heartfelt." He stepped forward, the guards eyeing him warily. "You think this is easy for me?" His voice hitched slightly. "I had to leave for you to have a normal life, Emma. I had to protect you from everything, from me. Protect me by leaving?" I shot back, feeling the bitterness rise like bile in my throat. "Being absent doesn't mean you protected me. It left me vulnerable. Do you even get that?" Maggie took a tentative step forward, sensing the intensity rippling between us. "Can we all just know?" I snapped, my eyes never breaking from my father's. "I will not allow you to spin some tale about sacrifice." "Not again." Before he could respond, chaos erupted once more as a figure shoved through the crowd, the turmoil reigniting as a frantic woman yelled out, "Get away from my son." She pushed past the guards, throwing herself onto the young man's shoulder. "I told you to leave him alone." Mrs. Robinson's son stood on shaky legs, gaze darting back and forth between the guards and his mother. It was a moment so raw, so liminal, that the air crackled with tension. I felt for him, a mirror reflecting my own turmoil, and my heart instinctively reached out, fogging my father's presence from my mind. I stepped closer to the family. "Please," I urged, voice earnest, "your mother deserves a chance at being heard." I glanced back at my father, aware of the torrent of emotions swirling within. "We all do. Just listen to each other." In the quiet pause that followed, I watched the flicker of possibility cross the guards' faces. Eric, the young man, breathed raggedly, nodding at his mother, desperation clearing the fog of fear clouding his judgment. "Then let her talk," he demanded of the guards, a hint of rebellion sparking to life. In that moment of unexpected solidarity, an ember flickered in my chest. Perhaps all was not lost. Perhaps if we could temporarily silence our past traumas, we could pave the way for truth, however painful it might be. Mrs. Robinson's steadfast determination and the courage of her son rippled through the compartment, weaving a fragile bond that felt almost sacred amidst the chaos. "Thank you," I said softly to Eric, my voice steady as I turned back to him. "Let her speak. She needs to for all of us." A tense agreement hung in the air as the guards reluctantly stepped back, their authority curbed, the tension lacing the air thickening with hope and expectancy. I could see the struggle in Eric's eyes as he waged an emotional battle within, but the shift was tangible. "Go ahead, Mom," he whispered, the tears shimmering like fragile glass in his eyes. "Mrs. Robinson straightened, her expression momentarily shedding the vulnerability from moments before. "I am scared, Eric," she admitted quietly, her voice fragile yet fierce. "But I'm here, and I will fight for you, just as you fight for me." As her words sank in, a communal breath was held, bracing against the torrid currents of fear. I glanced at my father, struggling with the emotions that boiled just below the surface. Could he find it within himself to contribute positively to this discourse? He looked as if he could shatter, like glass on a precipice, but before anything could be resolved, the jarring sound of a phone ringing echoed through the compartment, piercing through the tender moment we were sharing. My heart sank further as my father fumbled for his device, his aura suddenly shifting from somber to calculating. That I turned to Jake, who stood vigilant beside me, confusion etched on his face. Who could that be? He shrugged, but all I could think about was the glance my father cast in my direction, swirling dread crawling up my spine. What if this call was about more than just today? What if it was a signal of his involvement, a tether to a past I had worked so hard to escape? The piercing ring cut through the tension, drawing more than just attention, as conversations hushed and hope creaked under the weight of looming uncertainty. My father's expression morphed into something unreadable as he finally answered, voice barely above a whisper. "Yes. I know I'll do it." In that instant, I felt the ice forming around my heart, a chilling realization battling against the flicker of unity we had just begun to build. As panic flared within me, I couldn't shake the sensation that this moment would irrevocably change everything, the course of our lives fracturing anew, hanging on the precipice of whatever revelation was to follow. The weight of my father's betrayal hung heavy in the air, shrouding our fragile unity in impending darkness. My chest tightened as I strained to catch the words escaping his lips, each syllable a bullet, aimed squarely at the fragile hopes I had dared to nurture. I could feel Jake's arm brush against mine, supporting, grounding, a lifeline tethering me to the present. "Who are you speaking to?" I demanded, the need for clarity igniting in me like a wildfire. "What's happening?" My voice trembled, a fragile thread woven through the chaos. That he glanced at me, his eyes flickering with something that felt eerily akin to guilt but hardened with determination. "I need to. What do you need to do?" I pressed, stepping closer, my breath quickening. "Is this about us? About our family?" His gaze shifted away, locking instead onto the distant view of blurred landscapes rushing by. Desperation clawed at my throat. This was the man who had disappeared, leaving me adrift, and now he was pulling strings that could affect all of us, independent of the care or concern I once thought he possessed. "Emma, please," he stammered, but before he could deliver any more vague reassurances, Eric's voice cut through the fog of despair. "Let's focus on the situation at hand," he urged, his composure rekindled by the urgency of our collective turmoil. "Let the grown-ups call the shots, kids don't get hurt anymore." His mother, looking more resolved than ever, nodded next to him, her hand tightening around his arm. "Your father wasn't just a ghost, he was a man trapped by his own mistakes." She looked directly at me, her eyes reflecting back the fear that had lingered. "There are burdens that we each bear, but leaving them unchecked is what allows them to fester. I don't need a lecture about sacrifice or burdens." I snapped. My thoughts spiraled madly, memories of sleepless nights spun into an inconsolable tapestry of anger and confusion. "Not from you, not from him." Maggie, standing a few feet away, reached out. "We need to focus on what's in front of us, both for Eric and Emma," she said gently, her tone a soothing balm in our fraught circumstance. "Let's be honest about our past so we can fight for a better future." But honesty seemed impossible, a road paved with sharp rocks, each truth buried beneath years of hurt and regret. I felt my father's stare, the weight of his expectations crushing me into the seat. "What if this?" I pointed at him, feeling the urge to recoil. "What if this doesn't lead to a resolution?" The sudden jarring chime of my phone in my pocket broke through the tension, a blaring siren in the midst of our storm. I fumbled for it, the screen lighting up with an alert from an unknown number. Hang on. I shouted, unable to suppress my unease. I answered, the sound of a crackling connection on the other end biting into my mind. Emma? The familiar voice sent shocks through my system. You need to listen. It's urgent. Who is this? I barked, frustration rising, but a pang of recognition knotted painfully in my gut. The voice was hauntingly familiar, an echo from a life I thought I'd shaken from my past. It's Mandy, your mother's old friend. I need to talk to you about your father. Time is running out. A hush fell over our compartment, tension thickening the air. Every gaze turned toward me. All I could see was the growing confusion on Eric's face. What does she want? He asked, brows knitted together. The flatter of my heartbeat rattled through my veins as I recalled her frantic warnings about my father when I was young, whispering worries that hung like shadows in our home. What could she possibly know that would warrant such urgency now? I don't know, I muttered, pinching the bridge of my nose. I need to know why she's calling now, Emma. My father said, his voice low, a motley of concern and something akin to desperation. Maybe you shouldn't shut up. I hissed, anger flaring within me, feeling a surge of rebellion rise. You've manipulated too much already. My past is tangled enough, and now I have to hear it through you. The voice on the other end suddenly shifted. There are things you don't understand. Emma. Your father, he's not here just to fix things. This all leads back to a decision he made long before you were ever born. That I felt the room constricting around me, the air heavy with confusion as dread settled deeper within me. All my questions hung poised on the brink of a precipice I didn't know I was standing upon. What are you talking about? The echo of Mandy's breath crackled through the line. You need to understand, Emma. His past is coming for all of us, and it might just be the very thing that shatters everything we've tried to hold together. In that instant, something inside me fractured, a cascade of realization rushing in like a flood. I felt disoriented, the shadows of yesterday creeping closer. My father was not merely a wayward figure from the past, he was a monument to disillusionment, standing tall among the ruins of trust and heartache. I dropped the phone, the connection severed like the fragile line tethering me to my father's presence. The commotion around me faded into white noise. As I stood trembling, shadows deepened, the sense of danger spiraling into an uncharted realm of uncertainty. Taking a step back, I caught my father's gaze, and in that moment, resolved to unveil the web of truths buried deep within our history, no matter the cost. But as the world cracked open, I felt the chill of an unseen wind sweep through, heralding another storm on the horizon, a confrontation with a past I could no longer deny, but one that threatened to consume everything in its wake. My heart raced as I stumbled backward, each step a futile attempt to distance myself from the weight of my father's betrayal. The air felt thick with anger and confusion, wrapping around me like a suffocating shroud. I could see Jake's concerned face weaving through the tumult, his eyes pleading for understanding, but I was too caught in the storm. Emma? He reached out, his hand brushing against mine as if trying to anchor me back to reality. The warmth of his touch brought a small flicker of hope, a reminder that not everything was unraveling into chaos. Yet, my breath came in ragged gasps, and my chest tightened harder with every moment that passed. Behind Jake, Eric was still rooted in place, his face a canvas of bewilderment. What did she mean, Emma? What does your father's past have to do with all of this? His voice quivered with the innocence of someone who didn't yet understand the complexities surrounding us. I wished I could shield him from the harsh truths that loomed like dark clouds. Everything, it's all interconnected, I whispered, the weight of my words dragging me deeper into despair. My father had shrouded our lives in secrets, and now those secrets were clawing their way into the light, threatening to suffocate us all. Quietly, I returned to my seat, the din of the train dulled as I fell into deep thought. What had Mandy meant by his past is coming for all of us? The vague implication gripped me with icy fingers, rendering me paralyzed. I had spent so long crafting my identity, slowly chiseling away the influence of my father's choices, and now it felt as if I was ready to plunge into waters I had long evaded. Jake knelt beside me, his voice soft and earnest. We can face this together, you know. You're not alone. There was sincerity in his eyes that ignited a flicker of warmth in the depths of my heart. I nodded, grateful for his presence but knowing deep down that the shadows were far from gone. Hours ticked by as the train rattled on, each mile a reflection of my racing thoughts. As daylight began to fade into twilight, I caught a glimpse of my father, his head bowed, lost in thought just across the aisle. In that moment, I wanted to reach out, to ask him questions that rattled in my mind like a tin can tossed down a forgotten road, but the distance between us felt insurmountable. It was like I stood on one side of a vast chasm, and he on another, each of us trapped in our corners, unable to breach the divide. Suddenly, moments passed and were swallowed by hesitation, when the smell of freshly brewed tea wafted through the carriage. My senses were momentarily distracted, transporting me to calmer days, the peaceful clinking of cups echoing within my memories of childhood Sunday afternoons. Then I noticed my father rising from his seat and making his way to the small cart where a kind, elderly man was preparing drink after drink. As my father caught sight of him, his eyes shifted, an expression of recognition and regret washed over his features. "What's he doing?" I murmured, an unsettling sense of anticipation bubbling within me. Eric and Jake leaned forward, exchanging glances filled with unspoken questions. Just as the elderly man poured his first cup, my father approached with uncertain steps. I remember you," he said, the tremor in his voice tangible. "From the market all those years ago." The elderly man paused, his gaze piercing into my father's with a mix of nostalgia and pity. "You never returned my calls." "I always hoped you would," he said, sorrow dipped in his words. "Still chasing shadows, are we?" I leaned in closer, straining to catch the quiet conversation, every word uncovering layers of history I had not previously fathomed. This was my father's past unfurling with a delicate balance of familiarity and discomfort, reminiscent of unspoken debts that had not yet been reconciled. The elderly man continued, "Sometimes it's the choices we avoid that shape our futures the most." He handed a steaming cup to my father, whose hands trembled like autumn leaves caught in the wind. "Be careful, my friend. The past can come back to haunt you, and it often does. My breath caught. I sensed a deeper connect, a revelation teetering on the edge of unveiling itself, one that could reshape everything I thought I understood. Yet, I could only observe as my father absorbed the cryptic warning, silhouetted against the fading light beyond the window. "Can I join you?" Jake's voice broke through my contemplations, pulling me back. He offered me a small cup of tea, steam curling upwards like the hope I desperately craved. "It's chamomile. It might help." As I sipped, warmth spread through me, battling the encroaching darkness. A moment of kindness, a small gesture amidst the chaos, gave me a sense of building strength. But as soon as I allowed myself to relax, a sudden jolt shot through the train. It lurched violently, throwing everyone off balance. Cups clattered, and an uneasy silence hung thick in the air while I snatched for the armrest, heart racing anew. "Is everyone all right?" the conductor's voice rang out, firm but shaken. Beyond the window, an array of flashing lights caught my eye, pulling me back toward the real urgency at hand. "Get back, everyone." The urgency in the conductor's voice sparked fear, and I felt panic snaking its way through the cabin. Something was happening, something I did not yet comprehend. But as I turned to Jake, who had grasped my hand tightly, squeezing to convey unspoken worry, I couldn't shake the nagging feeling that whatever was unfolding was irrevocably linked to my father's past. The connection I had been yearning to understand grew more tenuous yet critical, a fragile thread that could unravel everything. Heart racing, as time felt suspended, I took a breath and prepared for the reckoning I had long avoided. The scream of the brakes echoed through the train, and just like that, our lives stood on the precipice of a revelation, hanging precariously as the unknown rushed forth like a tidal wave ready to swallow us whole. The train continued to rumble with an unsettling rhythm, but the screech of metal against metal began to fade into a low hum. As the jolting stopped and the panic in the cabin rushed out like air from a deflating balloon, I found myself hyper-aware of every sound around me. The chatter of frightened passengers melded with the muffled commotion from the conductor, but all I could focus on was Jake's opportune grip on my hand, his presence a tether to this bewildering moment. "Emma, what's going on?" Eric looked to me, his youthful brows knitted in concern. His innocence was a stark contrast to the storm brewing within me, and I was suddenly aware that my ordeal wasn't just mine anymore. Eric was entangled in this chaos. I don't know, I admitted, my mind racing with possibilities. The warning from the elderly man echoed ominously in my thoughts. Was this incident a harbinger of what lay ahead? We need to stay alert. I glanced at my father again, who had found his seat once more, his expression one of haunted remembrance. As if sensing my gaze, he looked up and met my eyes, a silent plea lingering between us. I could see his mind was racing too, a desperate search for answers churning behind weary eyes. Was it guilt? Fear? Or simply the weight of a past that refused to stay buried? Just then, the train's lights flickered, casting wild shadows across our anxious faces. The conductor's voice broke through the static of uncertainty. We will conduct a quick check on the situation ahead. Please remain seated and calm. It felt impossible. I wanted answers, and I wanted them now. I leaned toward Jake, my heart beating rapidly, the unsteady tremor of anxiety fluttering in my chest. I have to know what's been going on with my father, I whispered, the urgency of the moment driving my words. There's something he's not telling me, let us find out together, Jake replied, the resolve in his voice imploring me to trust him. I'm with you, okay, but instinctively, I felt a tug toward my father once more. The past beckoned to me, intoxicating and frightening in equal measure. I needed to cross that chasm, there was no other choice. As I rose from my seat, the train's shudder made the floor sway slightly beneath my feet. I navigated through the swaying aisle, Jake's presence trailing close behind like a steadfast shadow. My breaths were slow and calculated, each step pulling me closer to the man whose shadows I had spent so long trying to escape. When I reached him, he looked up, startled, as if I had pulled him from a trance. Emma, he said, his voice almost breaking, and in that moment, I was overwhelmed with emotion that threatened to spill over like a pot left too long on the stove. Why didn't you tell me? I demanded, but the words felt sharp and edged, like knives cut from my own fraught heart. What is it that I don't know? He shifted uncomfortably, glancing toward Jake, giving me a mix of fear and regret in his gaze. I thought I could protect you from this, from my mistakes. Protect me from what? What could possibly be worse than living in ignorance like this? I pressed, desperate for truth, the anguish in my voice barely masked. Eric reached our side, curiosity written across his innocent face, and I feared that with him present, my father might keep silent, unwilling to share burdens too heavy for a child. But I was finished with silence. I would break through whatever veil my father had hidden behind for my entire life. Before my father could answer, a sudden, ear-piercing shriek filled the air, jarring everyone out of the moment. Gasps erupted, followed by shouts from various passengers, but the conductor's voice rose above the din, demanding everyone's attention. Attention! We have an emergency situation. Please remain calm. We are experiencing a security breach. Do not panic. A security breach? The words hung in the air like a chilling omen, and panic seeped into the cabin like a growing mist. I turned to Jake, wide-eyed and breathless, but before I could speak, the doors at the far end of the carriage burst open, and a guard stormed in, urgency etched across his face. There's been trouble, he barked, his eyes scanning the terrified crowd. Anyone who knew Sir Mark, please step forward. My heart dropped like a stone, the name struck me like a thunderclap against the chaos. My father's name, the very essence of my tangled past, and with it the secrets that clawed their way back to surface, were now bombarding me like waves crashing against the shore. Without caring for the throng or the fear that coursed through my veins, I locked eyes with my father. What is this about? I called out above the rising clamor, the question resonating in the hearts of those around us. That he seemed frozen, as if caught in the headlights of an oncoming train. Emma, he said, his voice trembling, we need to leave now. But where? He wasn't sharing the full truth, and every instinct in me screamed for answers. A new flood of questions surged within me, battling the urgency of the moment. As the guard continued to call for anyone associated with my father, dread settled within my stomach. yet amidst the noise, I saw Jake's hand reach toward mine, another thread of warmth in the uncertainty. "He's here for you," he said softly, earnest and unwavering, as if trying to share strength meant to tether me from floating away in the surging chaos. But in that moment, as the urgency ignited within me, a single thought pierced through. Whatever this security breach entailed, I felt the walls of my world closing tighter around me. And with a sudden rush of urgency, I knew that I had to uncover the truth about my father's past before it unraveled everything I had fought to protect. My father's past was propelling itself toward a reckoning with relentless force, and in the whirlwind of fear and confusion, it was a truth I would have to seize before it was too late. The palpable tension in the air wrapped around us like a suffocating shroud as the guard's words echoed in my mind. Security breach. What did that even mean? My heart raced as I instinctively tightened my grip on Jake's hand, a lifeline amid the surging fear. "Emma," my father finally spoke, his voice barely above a whisper, but the urgency in his tone floated through the commotion, as if a single word could breach the gulf that had grown between us. "We don't have time. Follow me." I hesitated, glancing down at Eric, who stood frozen, his face pale. "We can't just leave," I protested, uncertainty clawing at my insides. "What about everyone else? This isn't going to end well for anyone if we don't move," my father replied sharply, grim determination etched into his features. There was a familiar fierceness in his gaze, one I had seen countless times growing up, as if he were preparing to face some invisible enemy, but I could scarcely recognize him through the haze of my own confusion. "Stay close," Jake urged, his voice grounding, steady. With no other choice, I shared one last worried glance with Eric before following my father deeper into the chaos. The train, once a vessel of promise and adventure, felt like a labyrinth, the walls pressing in with each hurried step away from the din of panic. We ventured into the narrow corridor, the sounds of shouting fading slightly behind us, replaced by the distant rattling of wheels and the ominous tone of my pounding heart. "What is happening?" I pressed once we were out of earshot of the others. "You need to tell me the truth now." My father hesitated, his eyes darting around, as if grappling with more than just my question. The world I had known was slipping away from me like grains of sand. "Emma, it's complicated," he began, but his voice wavered, betraying a crack in the resolute facade he had built. "Complicated?" I echoed incredulously. Complications had been the story of my life, a murky river filled with hidden currents. "What about your past? There's something connecting you to this breach." He took a deep breath, and at that moment, I thought for an instant I could glimpse the man beneath the layers of detachment. "There are people from my past who want something I can't give them." He looked at me, the rawness of his vulnerability almost stunning. "I thought I could keep you safe, both of you, both of us." I turned, glancing back for Eric, who was now out of sight, momentarily forgotten amidst the urgency. My father's admission stoked flames of confusion in my heart as warmth mingled with dread. "You mean this involves Mom too? It's time to face the truth, Emma." His voice faded, but the storm raging within me only intensified. Before I could ask more, a sudden tremor jolted the train, sending a ripple of urgency through the metal frame. The lights flickered violently, illuminating the dark corridor in frantic spurts. A warning klaxon blared, painful and persistent. A new wave of panic swept through the train. My father grabbed my shoulder, anchoring me for just a moment. "We need to get to the front car. It should be safer there." "Safer from what? Who are these people?" I retorted, frustration bubbling over, but he had already turned, pulling me along with him. As we hastened through the narrow aisle, I caught fleeting glimpses of other passengers, some reassuring their children, others trying to comfort each other, small peeks into lives tangled in their own tumult. It was a world away from the cocoon of fear that surrounded me. Just as I turned the corner, an unexpected face emerged from the shadows, the last person I anticipated amidst the chaos. "Evelyn?" I gasped, my voice low but carrying a swell of disbelief. The woman who had once been my mother-in-law stood before me, her demeanor a stark contrast to the fear evident in every other face. Momentarily, her presence felt like a ghost returned to the living, an echo of a past I thought was behind me. Her eyes were wide, shining with a mix of relief and urgency. "Emma, thank God you're here. I need your help. It's about your ex-husband." The mention of my ex sent a bolt of bewilderment through me. "What about him?" I managed to stutter, my mind racing through every scenario I had ever imagined involving him, but this wasn't one of them. "His life, it's all connected to this. We don't have much time," she implored, her hands clasping mine in a moment of unexpected tenderness. A deafening crash reverberated through the train, and I felt my breath hitch in my throat. My father's grip remained firm on my arm, but my resolve began to waver. "Emma, we need to go," he shouted, urgency coating his words, but as his tone rang out, I caught a glimpse of something shifting behind Evelyn's eyes. "What do you mean? What is it you're hiding?" I challenged, my heart racing with potential revelations. But before she could answer, I heard a voice from the rear, shrill and panicked, "Get out of the way." And just like that, the walls of my unraveling world threatened to close in completely. The train, too, had become an echo of my past choices, and I stood at the precipice, grasping for answers, ready to confront whatever truth waited in the shadows. But time was racing against me, and with another jolt, a truth sat heavy on my heart, a reality I would face head-on, or risk losing everything once more. The world around us spun into chaos once again, the jarring reality of a security breach heightening every heartbeat in the confined space. My mind raced with the implications wrapped around my father's words and Evelyn's urgency. I felt as if I was tethered to a splintering past that refused to let me go. "Emma." My father tugged at my arm, pulling me closer. His face strained with tension, I read the urgency painted across his features, a landscape of desperation. "We need to move now. They're coming for me, for all of us." "Who is they?" I demanded, the words spilling from my lips with a frantic urgency I couldn't contain. "What have you done? What are you trying to protect us from?" "Please," he implored, grabbing my shoulders. "I didn't want this life for you. I thought I could keep you safe." His eyes held stories untold, scars that my anger couldn't penetrate. In that moment, I saw a man wrestling with the weight of his choices, and the remnants of the bond we once shared began to tug at my heartstrings, burying the anger deep within. "Emma, you have to trust him." Jake called from a few steps back, watching the exchange unfold between my father and me. His voice was steady, but concern laced through it. It reassured me, sparking a kernel of hope. Evelyn, still standing close, looked between us, her expression heavy with a need to interject. "I was there when it all started. I know things that can help explain this mess." She took a breath as if steeling herself for what was to come. "When Jake and you were together, there were forces at play that none of us understood." "Stop!" I shouted, chest heaving, frustration rising like bile. "I can't handle half-truths any longer." A violent jolt racked the train again, and I staggered slightly. The lights flickered dangerously, mirroring the chaos within me. "Please," I whispered, looking from my father to Evelyn, searching for a thread of honesty before it all collapsed. "Just tell me what you know." "I deserve that much," Evelyn nodded, her features softening. "The people after your father aren't just seeking revenge, they want something much more. They believe he's hiding something that could expose them or put an end to their power. It's not only affecting him, it impacts everyone connected to him, including you and Jake." My mind swirled. The past was encroaching, grasping for the parts of my life that were meant to stay buried beneath the layers of years and hurt. "But why show up now?" I asked, my gaze darting to my father, who looked decidedly smaller standing against the chaos that surrounded us. "Why not before?" "Because he thought it was safe." "Because," she said, stepping closer, "he wanted to protect you until he could no longer lie to himself that he was safe." The weight of her words struck me hard. What lay between safety and sacrifice? My heart ached with the realization that the very elements I hid from were now chasing me down. I had intertwined myself with truths I couldn't escape. Suddenly, the distant sound of footsteps charged toward us, and the muddied veils of past and present began to warp. "We have to move." my father urged, urgency ripping through his voice. I glanced back at Jake, anchoring my uncertainty. He met my gaze, resolute, and my heart swelled with a flicker of warmth. We pressed forward, weaving through the chaos, but every step felt like I was trudging deeper into an abyss of revelations that threatened to consume me. Other passengers shrieked in fear as shadows darted around, drawing ever closer. Suddenly, I felt a squeeze on my hand. Jake's grip locked in place, reminding me that I wasn't alone in the absurdity. Racing toward the front of the train, we maneuvered through disoriented bodies, a blend of fear and determination pushing us forward. "Over here!" my father shouted, guiding us towards an emergency exit sign glowing ahead like a beacon. Is that safe? I questioned, anxiety thrumming through me as I recalled the disarray we had left behind. But my father's eyes were set, and I recognized in him the remnants of the man who had once fought for me. The decision hung in the air, uncertain and tantalizing. I took a breath to steady myself before nodding, that semblance of trust rekindling in the instinct to keep moving forward. In that moment of solid resolve, a commotion erupted behind us. My heart raced as I dared to look back just as a figure lunged forward, charging into the aisle in a violent spurt of chaos. "Stop!" he bellowed, eyes wild. "You don't know what you're doing." Time seemed to fracture as I grabbed Jake's hand tighter, adrenaline and panic coursing through my veins. "Who is that?" I gasped, recognizing the magnitude of our predicament but unable to process the truth that now riveted to the forefront. "That's Drexler," my father said, a tremor in his voice. "He's the one pulling the strings, and he won't stop until..." The rest of his words fell away as Drexler approached, a predatory look in his eyes. "You don't know who you're dealing with, old man," he roared. The once faint shadows now materialized into a monstrous reality, casting menacing silhouettes as the scales tipped, with a sudden twist of fury uncoiling within me akin to a flame igniting. I stepped forward boldly, defying the fear bubbling in my throat. "What do you want from him?" I demanded, my voice cutting through the chaos around us. Drexler's gaze darted to me, incredulity flashing across his features, amusement mingled with danger. "Ah, the prodigal daughter returns," he sneered. "You're just as foolish as he is, standing against forces far beyond your understanding." My blood boiled at his arrogance, but it was the truth lurking behind his words that shook me. I stood rooted to the spot, everything within me urging to shrink back. Yet another piece of me roared for battle. "I am not afraid of you," I pressed, finding strength in the anger building. I felt Jake's reassuring grip tighten on my hand, and somehow, he infused some of that strength into me, propelling me to face this nightmare. The confrontation intensified, a swell of electricity coursing through the gathering storm, and just as Drexler moved closer, my father lunged forward. "You will not take another thing from my family," he thundered, and a flicker of desperation gripped at the edges of my heart. With them standing against Drexler, I felt the armor residing within me solidifying. Senses heightened, I noticed the shimmering steel of a metal canister on the floor, an abandoned T-cart's remnants, and it sparked an idea. "We can't just fight, we have to outsmart him." Suddenly, recounting Jake's astuteness, I turned to him with urgency in my heart. "If we can create a diversion with the T," he understood in a flash, his eyes lighting up with reckless enthusiasm. "You mean a distraction like a smoke bomb?" My father turned to us, confusion etching a line across his brow. "What are you planning?" But I didn't wait for an answer. I took a chance and leaned into my instincts, hoping to wield the panic spiraling around us to our advantage. With a flash of collective resolve, we grabbed the canister before facing Drexler again. The moment was upon us, an inflection point where shadows and light fought for dominance, the tension palpable. Just as we flung the heavy canister into the fray, a muffled explosion rocked the air, and a plume of colorful steam erupted, filling the cramped quarters. Shouts of confusion erupted, masking our escape as the train lurched violently, a sudden shift hurling us toward an uncertain fate. In that maelstrom of chaos, I hardly comprehended as Jake and I bolted through, clutching my father's hand tightly as we barreled toward an emergency exit, the weight of decisions and actions colliding above us. The world spiraled, a dizzying collage of sound and color, but in that tumultuous whirlwind, a amid the explosions of emotion and chaos, I realized something profound. Forgiveness was not waiting at the mere end of the conflict, but the embrace of hard choices that we were fighting for more than just our lives but for our story to be rewritten. As we burst through the exit, fresh air enveloping us with a rush, the sun set the horizon ablaze with possibility. "Look at me," my father whispered, as I turned to him, the heartfelt gravity of the moment crashing down. In his eyes, I saw the glimmer of hope combined with vulnerability, a bridge finally being constructed between our estranged past and a fragile future. "Whatever happens next, we will face it together," he stated, his voice tinged with a newfound resolve that mirrored my own. And in that moment, I understood that life was poignantly layered by the choices we made, and while shadows might loom, together we could light the way toward healing amidst the echoes of our past tugging softly at the corners of our hearts, weaving our stories into a new tapestry woven with trust and togetherness. We rushed forward, ready to navigate whatever awaited us on the horizon, knowing now that our paths were intertwined, and that forgiveness was a journey we were all ready to embrace together. But as I glanced over to Jake, I realized that within the challenges ahead, this was not just a new chapter, this was our legacy, the culmination of trials we never imagined having to face, but side by side, we could forge a path defined by love, understanding, and possibility. And just as we stepped into the unknown, my heart whispered the truth: the weight of the past, the promise of tomorrow, every heartache has a purpose, every journey a destination, and in that moment, it crystallized together, we would write our own ending. The pulse of hope surged as the sun dipped beneath the horizon, casting us into a painted future, where every ending births a new beginning layered with dreams, stitched with threads of courage, illuminating our lives as we stepped boldly into the light. This was not merely survival, it was the unfolding of a story rebirthed in love and connection, a story that would record forever in the rhythm of our hearts, echoing on the wind, as we forged onward, together.